Hey, Mike.
Hey, Maggie.
How's that volume?
Good.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
Oh, I was born ready to do quarantine podcasts. Let's do
All
this.
right.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm Maggie,
I'm Mike,
and we're friends on fire.
and we are on a mission to get friends to talk about money. So, Maggie, should we start with a question from a listener or something more positive like a review from iTunes?
Oh, let's start with some reviews from iTunes.
All right, good.
Do you have some ready?
No, I was hoping you do. You
What?
manage our social channels, so
I know, but you said that as if like we actually hadn't discussed this part yet. I'm not sure if anybody wants to hear stuff like this right now. I feel like we're at a unique time in the world where we should just get like right down to things. But hold on, I'm going into Apple Podcasts real quick.
I mean, that's fine with me. You scheduled this recording session near my bedtime, so I'd like to get this over with.
Yeah, it's 9:00 on. Actually, it's 9:12 on. I've lost track of the days, to be honest. It's Tuesday or Wednesday.
I think it's Wednesday.
9:00 on Wednesday. This is when I just get going. The night is young for me. This is when I do my best work. This is about 40 minutes before Mike's bedtime. So here, let's read a couple of reviews. Okay, here's one. Informative and enjoyable. 5 stars. I'm really enjoying this podcast so far. Maggie and Mike have a great rapport, and I've quickly found the perfect balance of being professional and casual at the same time. Highly recommend. I like it. Professional and casual. It's very nice.
This makes me feel good during a
Yeah.
somewhat sad time.
A tough time in the world. Yeah. We should just keep rereading our few positive reviews to ourselves. Here's another one. This is a really good. I like this one because it's very honest, and it's why we're doing this. Approachable and topical. Normally, finances and money aren't an interest of mine, but in trying to be a responsible adult, I discovered this podcast and have changed my mindset about my spending, saving habits as a result. Mike has an approachable way of explaining what I consider a typically dry subject. Maggie provides a great balance with real-life examples of how to be better with money. The two have a very funny way of addressing these topics at a time when we need this type of guidance the most. You know what, Mike? We didn't even plan on this, but what's kind of funny is as I was reading that one of at a time that we need this guidance the most, that is what our topic is all about tonight, talking about something that is very relevant related to what's going on in the world right now. We're focusing this episode all around the idea of, pretending like you've lost your job now to prepare for what might be, a very kind of rocky and tumultuous year for many people around the world.
Yeah, depending on what type of news you are consuming, you're either hearing about the medical situation or, as I like to, follow the financial impacts of all this. If you've seen any of the unemployment numbers that have recently come out, and just in the past couple of weeks, and some of the forecasts for what unemployment could become, these are significant numbers. I mean, the most extreme forecasts have 30% unemployment in the United States. Would just be mind-blowing. I can't even picture that, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. And for those that have trouble with percentages, 30% is almost one person out of every 3 people will lose their jobs probably by the end of this year.
If that forecast comes to light.
Yeah, I was going to say, to be clear, that's not our forecast. That is how high some people are predicting unemployment could get based on the severity of what is happening right now. And the other thing is, Mike, I think it's worth just mentioning to people that we're going to skip right past all of the medical reality of things and what's happening around the world. And we don't mean to skip past it to belittle it in any way and make it less important than the other thing. We're just focusing on what you likely are listening to a personal finance podcast for. And so we want to get right into the kind of economic and financial aspects of things, since that's what we talk about on this podcast.
And regardless of what you think unemployment might become, maybe this is just a blip and in 2 weeks everything will be back to normal. The reality is that employment is not a universal right. You are not owed a job. You are not owed a certain amount of income. And so a job can be taken away for any number of reasons at any moment. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. It's like being emotionally prepared for the possibility that you could lose your job, because now I think we are being faced with the reality that this could happen on a very large scale in the U.S.
And I'd add, you said being emotionally prepared. I think our whole point today is being emotionally and financially prepared to be very blunt, we want you to pretend like you've already lost your job. That is our advice to everybody right now. And we'll get into what we mean by that. But to Mike's point, if the forecasts are wrong, if they're too extreme, that's great. Prepare for the worst. Be delighted when you find out in a few months that you haven't lost your job and you're still working, and appreciate that. Our advice to everybody is pretend like you've lost your job now, and we'll kind of get into what we mean by that. I think one quick just sort of intro story, Mike, that is worth sharing is I had the pleasure earlier this afternoon of speaking to someone who I'm a huge fan of and is like, I think on my top 10 list of like heroes in this world, if I can call him a hero. But just someone I really look up to and I've always respected and just held in very high esteem and regard. And his name is Mark Horstman. He co-owns a company called Manager Tools, and he hosts a podcast called Manager Tools. I swear I've been listening to this podcast since I was like 12 years old. But I think I was like 24 or something, really. Someone recommended it to me a decade and a half ago, and I've been listening to it for a very long time. And they put out great content. It's a free podcast. It's very highly rated and just really good quality. Can't recommend it enough. But they've been doing a whole series of podcasts on how to manage and lead through this crisis. I recommend listening to it, especially if you're in a position where you manage or lead people. And even if you're not, a lot of the advice is to any employee and any worker in any type of role. Great content they're putting out on this. But we were actually talking because I was thanking him because he happened to mention our podcast on his podcast, which was a huge deal to me and just something that was really amazing. I interrupted Mike at work and was like, "This is an emergency. I need to tell you something." And then it took him like 40 minutes to get back to me. So I was like, "Yeah, are you still there?"
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, sorry.
I am waiting for you to wrap this story up.
You're just waiting for me to take a breath.
Yeah.
I was like, I thought the mic wasn't working anymore. I was like, "Did you put me on mute?" I don't. Okay. Anyways, he said something to me tonight, and he said I could quote him on this. So he was saying, some of you will lose your job, and you never dreamed it was possible. This is going to be the biggest economic recession we've ever seen. There will be a long-term hangover from this. And his last point was, and that he just kind of kept drilling on, was people who have always felt that they were immune because of their performance and because of how highly regarded they are no longer immune. I loved how he said that because I think it just summed up like why we're giving this advice to act like you've already lost your job, and why we're talking about how bad things could get in the economy. And it might be sort of depressing and overwhelming to some people, but I think the idea is there's a lot of things you can do to prepare for this now, and we want to talk through that today. I'm taking a breath now.
Thank you for wrapping up that story. In summary, Maggie talked to a hero of hers. He listens to our podcast and likes it, and he gave some good advice.
Yeah.
End of story.
Very kind of him. Thanks, Mark.
All right, so let's get into our specific advice.
Let's do it. I also think what's worth noting is if you want to know why we're qualified to be giving you this advice, the reality is Mike and I have been living like we're going to lose our jobs for 10 to 15 years. Mike, maybe since the day you came out of the womb.
At least the day I started working and having a career.
At least the day you started working, right? I've been living this way for like 10 to 20 years. Honestly, probably the day I started working too. And so, we're very qualified to talk on this because we've been doing this for a very long time. So anyways, let's get into it. These are the big things we think you can do to prepare today.
The first point, which should not come as a surprise, is you should have an emergency fund to cover your living expenses if you find yourself unemployed.
Yes. How much do you think people should have, Mike?
It really depends on how comfortable you feel with your employment. I think a few weeks ago, people would have said, 3 months will be fine. I can go find another job. If things get really bad, people are going to be unemployed for long periods of time. And so the rule of thumb is like 6 months. But honestly, Maggie, you and I are in the school of thought that you should have multiple years of living expenses saved up. And I know that's extreme. It is hard to do. It takes a long period of time, but that should be your target.
Yeah, it should be your goal. And I think another way of thinking about it is I would suggest you have 1 to 2 years of expenses. Again, light expenses, not your like, high end of your lifestyle, but the bare bones that you need to survive for 1 to 2 years saved up in an emergency fund before you start doing frivolous things that you don't need to be doing, which we'll kind of get into more throughout this show.
It kind of goes to the point you like to make pretty frequently is, if you can afford stuff, then if it's meaningful and it provides value, you should go do it. But the affording thing point comes when you have saved up a considerable amount of money and can survive through a catastrophic
what's
event.
ahead. Yeah, can survive through what's coming for all of us.
So Maggie, here is a math question for you.
Okay.
If you have 2 months of living expenses saved up, what can you do tonight to double that to equal 4 months?
Oh, this is a trick question, and you've not given me any advance notice on this. First off, I've been doing these sort of like problems all week with my kids in e-learning, and I feel like all of these, sort of like word math problems they're presented with, half the time I'm like, this is a tricky question. How do they expect an 8-year-old to figure this out?
Are you trying to distract me from this question?
I am, to give myself more. I'm doing the math while I tell a random story. I think to double that overnight, you could, I love where you're going with this, by the way, you could cut your monthly expenses in half.
Yes.
And then you just took what, if you used to think it cost you, 10 grand a month to live, and you say, well, I have 2 months, that's $20,000. If you can cut yourself down to 5,000, look at that quick math I'm doing in my head there, you now have 4 months of $5,000 saved up.
Right. Good job, Maggie. Yeah, 9:30 at night is like your peak brain power.
Yeah, it's been a long day too. Okay, prepare for the worst again on the emergency fund, and then be delighted with the awesome amount of money you have saved if you never need it. And I think that's just our biggest advice around the emergency fund is you may have always felt really good because you're like, oh, I've saved a 3-month emergency fund, I'm doing great. So then I went and bought a new car and blah, blah, blah. Like now is the time where 3 months would make me very nervous because of what we are going into from an economic standpoint around the world. We're saying go higher, go big, and we'll talk more about how you can do that. And again, prepare for the worst. Be delighted if you end up with more money than you need at some point 2 years from now. That'd be great.
Let's say you're getting pretty nervous about the economy right now, and you have 6 months saved up. What you can do is stop spending money and cut your expenses and extend the amount of time that amount of money covers you for. So that's our next point is really start cutting back on your expenses like tonight.
Yes. Either to create an emergency fund that you don't have, or like Mike said, to perhaps double the size of what you already have in your emergency fund, or double the, length of time that will last you. So our second thing is stop spending money now.
And one of the things, Maggie, you and I have talked about, but I've also been talking about with a bunch of other friends, so I'm glad to know.
Wait, you talk to other people about money?
Yeah, I do. I talk to everybody about money.
I feel like now that we're not at work, I don't get as much time around you, and I'm just like, is Mike talking to like his neighbors and stuff, and like, I'm all these conversations I just can't be in. It's so sad.
Okay, so I was talking to some other friends, and there's all these recommendations out online really about, supporting your local economy. And we talked about this on our last episode.
Yeah.
And everybody I've talked to has said, that sounds great in theory, but I got my own shit to worry about. And I can't just be throwing money around at everybody that has a problem because I have problems.
Yeah.
And so, the idea that you would stop spending money right now might seem to some people a little unpatriotic because we live in a consumer economy. Our spending drives our success as an economic powerhouse. And so stopping this is the opposite of what the government is telling us to do, but it's what we are telling you to do because that's how you save.
I've struggled with this a lot myself, and I was just talking to some friends on a walk earlier tonight about this.
Whoa, other friends?
I know, other friends. That just the idea of, balancing, and again, to Mike's point, like it could sound a little controversial right now to say, stop spending money and stop supporting your local businesses and, whatever it might be. But you need to put all of this in perspective, right? So each of you know your own financial positions and whether you are in a position to help support small businesses or not. If you have an emergency fund for 6 to 12 months and you feel comfortable with that, and you feel good about your job and whatever else, or even if you don't feel good about your job, but you have a strong emergency fund and you want to help small businesses and companies and people who have been good to you, go for it. If you do not have an emergency fund right now, I would highly discourage you from spending money you don't have, because right now your family is your small business. And if you don't have an emergency fund, you really, as much as it may feel selfish to some people, like you might need to look out for yourself first, because it doesn't help the economy when you foreclose on your house and when you can't pay your mortgage and, you know, all of the other repercussions. And you may need to put your family first before someone else's during this difficult time, which I know sounds heartless to say in a way, but it is the advice that we would give to you.
You know what this reminds me of, Maggie? And I don't know why I thought about this. It's like when you're on an airplane, you listen to the safety video.
Oh, yeah.
When the oxygen masks come down, put it on yourself first, not on your kid, because if you pass out, you can't help your child.
That is a great reference. It is the same idea. You will be able to help more people down the road if you can first help yourself and your own family. And look, you got to prioritize. I would even, it's funny, Mike was saying earlier, like, stop spending money like now, tonight. I would even go as far as to say you might want to undo some things you've already committed to. So, you know, I've been seeing things hit my credit card that I may have forgotten I was doing or were happening. Like, we have a spring break trip coming up in a week, and we have an opportunity to get out of it because of the policy and because they've adjusted their policy because of Corona. All of these things where you may have just been charged for something and you didn't realize you were charged. Usually within a couple of days, you can always call the company back and be like, oh, hey, I meant to cancel. Like, can you please remove this? And they will. Another thing that is helpful is on your credit card, most of them have different apps, and you can actually sign up for push notifications on your phone every time a charge goes through, which is helpful for like identity theft and other things. But it's helpful because anytime something's charged on your card, you see it and you immediately think like, do I need that? Do I even know what that is? Did I realize that was going to be charged? Can I call and cancel that real quick? But let's jump to one of the biggest ways you can control your spending right now, and kind of the first step.
The most important thing you should start doing, if you haven't already, start tracking your expenses. We did a whole episode about this, episode 15. This is going to be the first step to help you evaluate what all of those outstanding charges are and help you kind of hone in on what your base level living expenses are. It's the most important thing you can do right now.
Yeah, and you need to know what your, you know, bare bones budget is to be able to survive, so that you can create an emergency fund and have a sense of kind of where you are financially, so that you can make decisions about how you want to spend your money. If you want to eat out tonight, if you want to support that small business, or if you need to tighten things a bit more right now.
But we are not endorsing going out and eating out, because I'm pretty nervous about this whole virus thing.
Oh yeah, that's true. Well, I didn't mean eating out in the restaurant. I think almost all restaurants are closed inside now, but picking up food.
Just double checking. And once you tally up all these things, or if you already have this list, start going through and kind of ruthlessly start cutting stuff, especially if it's something that you can just turn back on in the future. You know, Maggie, you talked about kind of pausing your TV subscriptions or your streaming TV subscriptions every once in a while. Like, if you're getting nervous, you should go through and just start chopping stuff out. I bet what you're going to find is that you really don't miss it at all or very much. Just
reconsider everything. Look at every single line item that you are being charged in every single one of your accounts. You know, get the Mint app, whatever you need to do, but look at everything and reconsider if you truly need that. My new motto is, if I was unemployed, would I still do this? That should be everyone's motto right now. And as you're going through and reviewing your expense tracking and reviewing your budget, just reconsider it. Like, would you do it if you lost your job? Given what's happening in the economy, I think many people should be operating under the assume and plan for the worst. And then again, be delighted every day that you still have a job. And then when you're done canceling things, what should you do, Mike? Cancel more things.
Oh, cancel more things. I thought I
thought you were done. You did your first phase, but like, cancel more stuff.
Right.
Do crazy frugal things. We did a whole episode number 17 on this if you want some ideas or inspiration. But when you think you've cut out all the expenses you could cut out, there's probably more you could do, and like kind of keep going through and keep doing additional rounds of review and tiers of expense cutting.
Maggie, to what's your motto? Like if I was unemployed, another way to think about it is how stupid would I feel if I bought something really extravagant and then lost my job the next day?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think most people would be filled with pretty intense regret if they did something frivolous and then lost their stream of income.
I think people should really get creative also on really thinking hard about how they can save money. I had one of my friends who recently actually quit her job that was saying that she might sell one of their cars because she was like, I think we could actually get by with one car. And that's a big expense. And then also like the cost of car insurance is really expensive. And so even just thinking a little bit outside the box of like, what could you do? What might you do again if you did lose your job? And what could you do proactively in advance of that to be able to build up a healthy emergency fund?
Another creative thing you could do is, like Maggie, keep your house 50 degrees in the winter and 105 degrees in the summer. I mean, you'll be miserable, but it's a creative way to save money.
I'm saving money by the fact that we're recording remote, Mike, because when you come over here, I have to crank up the heat. And you know what I realized this past weekend?
What?
I still had my Nest set. Like when you come over, I'll set the Nest the night before to start the heat so that it's nice and comfortable because you're very delicate. You need it to be a certain temperature in order to record the podcast. And then I forgot to turn that setting off. And so like last weekend, I was like waking up Sunday morning and the heat was coming on and I was like, why is the heat on? And it was like really hot outside too.
Listen, being delicate, that is not needing a room to be warmer than 60 degrees.
Tomato.
All right, fine.
We'll agree to disagree on that one. But like, I would say, like, never mind. I don't know what my point was. Mike's delicate. That was my point.
Okay.
Another thing is, this is a tricky one right now, but like, start looking around your house. Like, what do you have that you could sell now that you don't need, that you don't use? The reason I say this one's a little bit tough right now is because a lot of like, we have like some pretty active like parenting listserv groups and stuff that sell a lot of toys and kids' clothes and stuff. And a lot of them are sort of shut down right now to say like, we should not be, spreading things from house to house right now in terms of exchanging goods. But there's a lot of things where like, you may have some old camera or some things that you could sell on eBay or clothes or other items that you could take to a consignment shop. Well, they're probably not open right now, but think about things you could sell that you could get rid of, especially higher value things that just aren't adding value to your life and could help to pad an emergency fund for the future.
So we've given you guys a lot of advice. Most of it we've covered already on different shows, but this is the sort of thing that you should be doing all the time. And it's just now becoming relevant for a different reason, but it should be an important part of your life, just in the same way that Maggie and I have made it a part of our lives for decades.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Mike. And it's becoming almost like an imperative right now around the world. And I know we talked on a past show about like the quarantine of consumption and the idea that people are going to need to change their consumption patterns because they may not be able to afford to have the same patterns that they've had in the past. But the thing that I think is just so important that we always want to reiterate is, although it may sound almost like a little depressing when we say like, act like you lost your job, like sock away all this money, quit spending money, cut this, cut that, etc. We don't believe that this will change your happiness level in any way. We actually believe that if you do all of these things, you will be happier. We've seen it with ourselves. We've seen it in other people. And I think if you were to go and ask a bunch of people who have an emergency fund and who don't have an emergency fund, how good it makes them feel to know that they have that cushion and that safeguard, I think you would hear everyone who has an emergency fund feeling so much better and so much more confident during a tough time like this. I think just the point is we believe this will make you happier. And we don't want people to think of this as something where they are going to have to suffer and go without and not have things that are important to them.
And we have a whole episode about happiness coming out soon.
Yeah, what's it called, Mike?
Happiness, Sex, and Money.
Yeah, I hope that episode is a good teaser for people to want to listen to it. The last recommendation we have for people, which is, it is financial related because this is how you make money, is we want to give just a couple of really quick kind of career and job tips given what is currently happening in many industries and around the broader global economy. The first one is, use any downtime that you may have, if you have it at all, to really, brush up on your skills and do some self-improvement and growth and development focused activities that could help you if you were to find yourself out of a job sometime soon. There's a lot of places right now online that are opening up free classes that they usually charge for. So look for some of those resources and, really think about how you can focus on your own professional development during this time.
Additionally, with some downtime that you may have, get your resume updated and consider hiring somebody to do it professionally.
Ugh.
You guys might think that a resume is something that nobody looks at, but as a hiring manager who's hired people in the past, like, the resume is the most important thing. It can get you in the door or knock you out immediately, and you have to have something that looks really good and communicates your message. So definitely work on your resume. Also,
I'm shocked you recommended that they hire someone to help them.
Yeah. Resume writing
man.
is a very specialized skill.
I know. I think it's because... Go ahead.
This is my list, Maggie.
I know. Go ahead.
So you might think you're really good at resumes, but people who do it professionally are awesome at it, and it makes a big difference. So if you are thinking about looking for a new job, definitely get your resume updated.
Have you ever paid someone to help you with resume?
Yeah, I did.
Oh. That resume? The one I saw, you paid someone?
Oh, shut up,
I'm just
Maggie.
joking. Go ahead.
So, funny story, I also interviewed with Maggie when I started at this job, and interviewing is another very kind of specialized skill, and it takes practice. And so you should use your time to practice your interview technique, answering questions, and just do it over and over again, because as good as you think you are, you will be 100 times better after you have 5 or 10 interviews.
Yeah, I'll give another plug for a Manager Tools podcast that we talked about before this. They also have a podcast series called Career Tools, and they have a lot of really good resources on resume writing, interviewing, etc. And most of them are through their podcast and free. They have a couple of paid tools, but a ton of their content is all free. And so if you're trying to save money, something like that is a great resource in terms of you may not be able to pay for help, but you certainly can get professional help in other creative ways like that. So I think our last recommendation just on the kind of career job category is just be mentally and physically ready for the fact that you could lose your job. All of you know what field you work in. Mike and I happen to work in the travel industry, and we're going through a pretty tough go right now as an industry, just based on the reality that, travel around the world has come to a grinding halt in the past few weeks. So I think it's just important to be mentally and physically prepared so that when that day comes, you're ready. Just thinking about what would your plan be if you did lose your job? Because again, can't hurt to just prepare for the worst and think about things like that.
So let's recap this episode with our top 3 points.
Okay, number 1, create an emergency fund.
Number 2, stop spending money, or at least reduce it dramatically.
Number 3, get prepared mentally and physically to lose your job. Be ready. Like we said on all of these things, prepare for the worst and then be delighted every day somebody decides to keep paying you to do work for them, and just be happy and thankful that you have that opportunity in this world, because many will not over the coming weeks and months and year.
All right, Mike's Minute on the mic.
Okay, I don't have one. You got a good question to...
No, I don't. I'm tired.
Okay.
It's almost my bedtime.
I got a question.
Okay.
Mike's Minute on the mic. Just to remind folks, this is where I get to ask Mike one surprise question, and he only has 60 seconds to answer it. Just getting my timer ready, Mike. Mike, walk me through your bedtime routine, since it's basically 9:50 p.m. and I think you're going to bed in 5 minutes.
Well, I sort of get ready for bed when I get my kids ready for bed. So brush my teeth and all that sort of stuff. So it's 7:30. And then I watch TV or read or work on some Friends on Fire projects. And then
Nice.
at 10 o'clock, regardless of how I feel, I just go lay down and go to sleep.
And you immediately fall asleep?
In most cases, yeah.
Wow. If I laid in bed at 10 o'clock, I would just lay there for hours.
Yeah, but then I get up at 5:30 and go work out.
Oh, you get up at 5:30 and work out every morning?
Yep.
Wow, how do I not know this?
I don't know. Probably because you don't wake up until like 9 or 10 o'clock most
We
days.
literally, we joke about this. There's a thing called follow the sun, which is what some companies have when they have like redundancy around the world. Mike and I follow a follow the sun strategy where, like he'll finish working on something and it'll be like 9:30 on a Saturday or something. And then I'll proof it. By the time he wakes up, I'm finished with my piece because I was up for another 3 or 4 hours after he went to bed. But I'm not up I wake up, hours later than he does. So we have funny schedules.
And that was another Mike and Maggie's 3 minutes on the mic.
Yeah.
All
you
right.
did good on your part. So
Thank you.
Through.
All right. Let's wrap this up, Maggie.
Okay. If you have any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. So you can call us or text us at 404-981-3370. You guys, we would love to hear from you. We are cooped up in our homes with our spouses, with our kids. They are all lovely people, but it's a little isolating at times. So we would love to hear from some of our favorite listeners. Please call us, give us a tip, give us a comment, ask us a question. We would love to hear from you.
And please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. It really helps other people find our show.
And we might read it for you on the air too, so that's pretty
right.
exciting. You can also find us at friendsonfire.org.
All right. This was fun.
Yeah, this worked pretty well. This was our first better quality remote recording process. So good night, sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite.
Thanks. Good night,
Okay.
Maggie.
Bye, Mike.